I recently replayed through what I consider to be one of the best horror games out there, Outlast. During my playthrough, I began to realise how easy it can be to mitigate some of the scare factor. A lot of the scares come from jump scares, so remembering where they are always helps, but the main scare factor comes from being hunted and chased by the villains of the game. Walker, Traeger, Gluskin. That primal fear that comes from the only option being run is instantly swapped out for fun when you realise you can just keep breaking their ankles and shutting doors on their faces. By the time that I finished Outlast's main story, I was feeling a bit underwhelmed, honestly, which I've never felt on my many playthroughs of this game. What I did find new was that the best segments were in the sewers and the courtyard, the reason being that the slogan of the game, "You can't fight back, you can only run or hide," was never more true than here. Outlast's gameplay is very simple. You, as a journalist, have a camera and a goal. Find out what's going on at Mount Massive Asylum. Seems like an easy task, right? It's not. The asylum is overrun with variants. The doctors and medical staff would call them patients, but really they were test rats for their experiments. Experiments that would leave them broken, angry, mutilated and disturbed. The magnum opus of Murkoff was the Wall Rider Project. They would take these patients and force them into a state of lucid dreaming by literally breaking their minds. They used the metamorphic engine to then have the subject hopefully control the Wall Rider. A figure that's ghostly in appearance, but it's actually an apparition formed of many nanites. After numerous patients, experiments and failures, they finally landed on a breakthrough with William Billy Hope. He was the first to become a host, but due to his pent-up rage against those who tortured him, he began to use the Wall Rider to kill all those who hurt him and all those in his way. This then caused the breakout of patients around the asylum and everyone who was classed as not clinically insane fighting for their lives. But as the player will come to learn, they can't fight back. Their only options are to run, hide, or die. And that brings me to Miles Upshur, the journalist who's reading an anonymous email in his car and preparing his camera to document what took place here. Fast forward and we've been dragged through sewers and had a taste of freedom in the courtyard. This brings me to why these areas are my favourite in the game, at least in my most recent playthrough. They play on exactly what Outlast is supposed to be. They are so dark, so dark that even the night vision on the camera doesn't help. In the sewers, you're being chased down by none other than Walker. Each step he's taking, his chains rattling and the water swishing in his way. Paired with his theme, and it easily becomes terrifying. As mentioned earlier, it's kind of easy just to run past everything and debate the AI by running around things or vaulting over at the same time that they do, but in the areas where it's complete darkness, pitch black, it gave me that primal fear of the dark that we have. You know that feeling when you're being watched? Yeah, it's like that, but you know you're being watched by a guy who's well established in the art form of ripping limbs off people. And due to the complete darkness, even your one tool isn't as helpful as it should be. At least in the sewers, you can use the darkness to your advantage of not getting caught. The camera's zoom feature also really helps with locating and tracking the abouts of Walker, but then we get the section outside in the courtyard. Now we have to deal with the pitch black nothingness as well as the weather not being on our side. The raindrops on the lens of the camera make an already blurry visual even more unclear, and that zooming feature is no longer viable as whenever you zoom outside it just does nothing. You really are out of options here. Walker is stalking you, tracing your scent, and you just have to deal with it. That's why I love these areas. Other sections like the chapel, security and the prison wing all have great elements, but once I've done them I felt there was no way to have that same sense of dread reoccur, and even though I knew where I was going in the sewers and outside, the gameplay feature of taking away or at least nullifying the usefulness of my one tool always kept it feeling fresh and instilled that horror. Then I played the Whistleblower DLC.
Die! I know, sex often entails the same things with more suffering.
The one thing I remembered without even a slight inconsistency was Gluskin, and that one moment, which I'll get to later. He is such a memorable and vile villain, one that's not easily forgotten. And whilst Gluskin is the best part of the DLC, he's not the only good part. In fact, I believe that of all the games in the Outlast franchise, Whistleblower is the best of them all. We play as Wayland Park, a software engineer who's been working for Murkoff only a couple of months at this point, but what he's witnessed has pushed him to report the company for its disgusting methods of research. Wayland is the one who sent the email to Miles. We then see the metamorphic engine in use and see none other than Gluskin being forced into it. He's screaming and pleading for Wayland to help, and little does he know that he's trying. Nonetheless, he has to do what he's forced. He knows what the company's capable of, and being surrounded with guards with guns is a fairly convincing thing. We see Wayland has a family, and even though he's putting them and himself at risk, he knows Murkoff need to be exposed. After he helps with the metamorphic engine, he heads back to the server room where his laptop is, only to find that it's not alone anymore. Murkoff executive Jamie Blair, who is funding the Wall Rider project, finds the email and threatens Wayland before knocking him out and taking him in as a new patient. This is where the DLC really starts. After Wayland is exposed to the engine and some other things.
Let me help.
Billy, now possessing the Wall Rider, begins wiping out the scientists and other staff, thus causing the breakout and the events of the main game. Wayland picks up a camera because this is Outlast and your mission begins. Escape. The gameplay is the same. You run from variants whilst trying to complete certain tasks that push you further to freedom. The thing is, with the main game it can start to become repetitive quite quickly, but because Whistleblower only takes like an hour and a half, 2 hours to beat, it feels a lot better in pacing. Throughout you're chased by Billy, a cannibal with a power tool, and of course our favourite Walker. I really like Walker as the mascot of Outlast, but the main game's introduction of him is completely overshadowed by the way the Whistleblower did it. At that point, we've seen someone use a microwave to warm someone's scalp. Oh yeah, and there's a fucking ghost. But seeing the guards barricade themselves while screaming that it's not even human anymore, it creates a moment where you're imagining a bunch of different things that could burst through that door. But it's Walker. And at that point we already knew about him, and even then they still managed to create a sense of dread in not only the build up but the reveal. So his first appearance in the DLC feels like it's the first time we're ever meeting him. It adds weight to the character and doesn't make his reappearance feel cheap, but instead adds value to him. Although the DLC is short, it manages to cramp so many moments of awe, and not just in the bad way. Whilst you're trying to escape, you come across Father Martin, which doesn't seem too odd considering this is a prequel to the main story. Holy shit, it's not a prequel. It's happening at the same time. There's something so special about figuring out that Wayland and Miles' stories are taking place simultaneously. Once you see it, it starts to slowly unravel and you see more and more of their stories intertwining. From the message, to Murkoff's security dealing with Traeger's crushed body, to the burning chapel, and the ending. But before I get too ahead of myself, let's talk about the levels, because it was them in combination with Gluskin that really made me want to make this video. At the start, I was talking about how the complete darkness of the sewers and the courtyard causes the camera to lose its appliance within the gameplay. In the DLC, there's also some very dark areas, but the one that stood out the most was when you're once again outside. The section itself is great, with some very alarming games of basketball, but it's the Silent Hill-like fog that creates such an atmosphere. This time around, the camera's night vision becomes unusable as the nearby lights cause it to become overexposed, forcing you to put it down and rely on what you see right in front of you, which then causes you to second guess what you're seeing, since even figures don't seem clear when they're stood right there. They managed to add another outside section in the dark while also keeping it fresh, and although the camera wouldn't magically cause you to see everything in real life, the overexposed camera feels a bit more realistic to me than when you're struggling to see at all in the main game's courtyard section. It felt more varied and new, a unique problem tied to this area. Unlike the main game where other sections like the sewers were also so dark and night vision couldn't reveal everything around you, Whistleblower feels like innovation. Following on from the courtyard is the most memorable section of the entire Outlast trilogy. After the fall, you begin to make your way through the maze. In the dark elsewhere are a couple of people bickering about how the visitor, you, could be a goat, a sacrifice to save their own skin. Literally.
To bear our guilt, our gender, a small piece of flesh between us and the blade. You
A variant stops you and warns that if either of you are caught, you'll be handed over to him, the man downstairs, and refers to him as
Very bad. Very bad.
Bear in mind, this is a variant who's mutilated as a result of the experiments he's undergone, and he's most likely a violent person given the psyche of the majority of people in the asylum, and for him to refer to this mysterious person in this way puts Gluskin way higher as a threat than any of the other villains in the franchise. Before meeting the man himself, we instead come across his artful recreation of childbirth. You'll have to look this one up yourself, because if I unblur the screen right now, this channel will get nuked. To paint a foul picture, it's the body of a man posed as if in labour, with their body having been mutilated to appear like a woman's, and rather than a baby coming out, it's the head of a man. It's all kinds of fucked. We then meet the Maker in a tailored suit, and the first thing he says to Waylon is,
Die.
he's the groom and you're the bride. Gluskin has a fascination with wanting to get married. He wants a family and wants his bride to bear his child. There are no women in Mount Massive Asylum, so he has to try and make a woman. After a chase, he does manage to get a hold of Waylon by trapping him in a locker and knocking him out. He then straps him to a table with a saw blade, ready to begin the transformation from captive to his wife. He mentions that he's tried this on others, but they weren't strong enough to survive and therefore not worthy of being his bride. And right before Waylon's turn, we see someone else having to go through this, and it's safe to say that it will not fail to make you cringe and grab your balls and plead. Luckily, someone manages to stop Gluskin right before he can remove any parts. Jesus Christ. Then a chase begins with you being hunted, and he constantly talks about how his mother used to tell him to marry and start a family. We can see from notes in game that Gluskin's backstory is one of the saddest. He was abused by his father and uncle at a very young age. So young that he didn't know it was wrong, just that it hurt. Later in his life, he would become a serial killer who killed and mutilated women, which would then lead to his incarceration. As you're on the run, you come across a room of his victims, hanging like decorations. You can tell that these people have been mutilated in ways that we've seen previously, with parts of them removed and parts added. However, something I never noticed previously until I used a free cam mod was that some of the bodies have other people's faces sewn on. Little details like this that most players will probably miss is why Gluskin is known as the most vile and psychopathic of all the Outlast villains. He's so twisted that even in a moment of life and death, he continues to try and hang Waylon, which results in his own demise. Gluskin, without a shadow of a doubt, is the best aspect of the DLC. He's the star of the series for me. No matter how memorable Walker's chains are as he stalks you, or the design of Traeger and his giant fuck-off scissors, it's Gluskin, his setup and his execution. I don't think it's possible to forget what he tried to do and what came before it. After Waylon manages to escape, he's on the approach to the exit when Jamie Blair stabs him in a last-ditch attempt at saving Murkoff's reputation. I think it's probably a little late for that though. This is when the DLC and the ending of the main game come together. In Miles' story, he ends up going down the secret underground lab and meeting Rudolph Wernicke, who was in charge of Project Walrider. He's tasked with shutting down the metamorphic engine, otherwise Billy won't let anyone escape. Miles manages to do it, but as he's limping out, he's ambushed by Wernicke and soldiers who put him down, choosing Murkoff's reputation over a man that just put an end to a lethal threat.
You have become the host.
Turns out, while Billy is gone, the Walrider's not. The host just changed, and now it's possessing Miles. The two work in unison to control the Walrider, so although we hear it beginning to kill all the soldiers and likely Wernicke too, the part that Miles controls still wants this corporation to go down, which then brings us to the final of Whistleblower. Miles, now partly controlling the Walrider, ends Blair and helps Waylon get out. Although Miles wouldn't be the man that revealed the secrets to the world, he would still achieve his goal. We see in the comics the aftermath of this footage getting out, and we get to follow a little bit more of Billy's story. It's really sad, honestly, but it's a great read, so if you're interested at all, I do highly recommend checking it out. The small journey that the DLC takes you on is peak horror and peak Outlast. The overall story and the in-game beats are just better in my opinion. The way it unfolds that the two stories are taking place at the same time whilst also making each feel unique to each other within the same setting is a testament to the innovation of the game. Despite the asylum being functionally the same, the depth they managed to add was significant, separating the two stories in gameplay that caused it to feel new. If you haven't, you should definitely check out both Outlast and the Whistleblower DLC. Out of all the games in the franchise, I still think these are the best, and that the Whistleblower DLC is honestly the best of them all. Its horror isn't subjective. Being chased by a man that wants to cut you apart and create a bride is disgusting, it's vulgar, it's vile. The experiments and the corruption of the Murkoff company is not unrealistic considering some of the connections this shares with real world events. Outlast is truly special, and the Whistleblower is outstanding.